Welcome to the Eastern Progress Media Network. You are listening to our feature series podcast. My name is Riley Linnehan, and I'm here with Dr. James Blair. He has a very interesting story to tell us about his marketing career, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get started with a question here. What could you tell me about your marketing career? Some of your best experiences, unique experiences maybe, anything along those lines really.
Yeah, so Riley, my marketing career started when I was in college. There was a summer collegiate baseball team that I worked for. They're called the Southern Ohio Copperheads. So I was able to kind of get some marketing experience with them. I wanted to originally work in the sport industry, and I worked on their promotions and marketing committee. So a lot of it was trying to get the word out about the summer collegiate baseball games that were that summer. So you've got mostly a college town, so we see the population drop significantly in Athens during that time. So it's definitely a struggle to try and find people to go out to those games, especially when you've got so many different entertainment options. So I was able to stay on with them the next year of my internship, and definitely learned a lot of fun things. Baseball is an interesting area because they've got a long season, especially in like the Major League Baseball, 160 some games. So if your team's doing bad, it's tough to market, get people to sit in those seats, get sponsors to pay those big dollars. But even for a smaller one like a summer collegiate team, it could be a struggle at times. But then when your team's doing good, it's also nice to see the people in the stands. The sponsors are happy because they're getting their advertisements out there. But we got to do a lot of cool and interesting promotions. I know one that I personally learned a lot from was courses nearby, and we had a promotion where 3 people would hit a golf ball in the outfield and try and stick it next to a flag. And the time we ran it, the opposing team was out there, and one of the people just hit the ball way too far, almost hit one of the outfielders in the head. And after that, we learned we're only going to do that promotion when our team's going to be in the outfield, and definitely had to learn about risk assessment. But there were plenty of other things where we worked with local business incubators. There's a group where they started their own bake shop. We were able to get them to come out to the game. They didn't have money to be able to do a large sponsorship with us, but we wanted to have an end-of-the-year celebration for our fans, for our team, and for the staff. Big, giant cake, and offer that to people who came to the game that day, a slice. And they agreed to actually make several sheet cakes, and we would pass those out as people came to the game and to some of our players throughout the game. And that was a way for them to get their business out there, being a new bakery in the area. But at the same time, we didn't have to pay for the cake and some of the other treats that they had brought. So for marketing, I transitioned from there to, after my undergrad career, I worked for a company called Reynolds & Reynolds, where we were in their voice of the customer department. So it's under marketing research. And we did a lot of surveys, statistical analyses to see why customers were leaving us, what do they really like about our products, what could they change and improve. And that got me interested in the research area. And from that, I ended up getting my MBA at the University of Dayton. And while I was doing that, I was seeing some of my friends that were saying, hey, my employer's paying for this, I don't have to pay. And the tuition bills can add up after a while. And during my first year, I was talking to one of my buddies who worked for the Dayton Dragons baseball team. And I was like, it'd be really great if they had like a sport management grad assistant. And I've got that background in sports. The undergrad program I was at had a really good reputation. And when I was talking to Phil, Jessica was sitting at our table. It was the first day of our marketing MBA class, and she's like, I am the sport management GA, and I graduate after this semester. So the graduate assistant is they basically do research and help with teaching and grading in the classroom. And I interviewed for that. I was able to get it. And the nice thing is they pay for all your school. So there's no tuition cost, and they get you a stipend. So I was able to do that my last year at Dayton. And while I was doing that, I got to work on different research projects. We did one where we did a survey with an NHL team, and we had surveyed their luxury suite holders, so the actual businesses that hold the luxury suites as well as the salespeople. And what we were able to find out was the most important thing that they valued in those luxury suites was parking. So the thing that you don't even have until like you're there, you're not experiencing it during the event, but you've got it when you walk, can really set the tone, because with these luxury suite holders, it's not usually normal people like us that are going to watch the game. It's going to be business executives. They're paying hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for these particular seats for the season, and they're bringing suppliers, potential partners, customers, and they're trying to wine and dine them to get business deals done. So if you start off in a parking lot and the parking attendant's not friendly, they're not affiliated with a sporting event, and you've got to walk all this way, that can really turn off that business deal from the get-go and also leave a bad impression on the way out. So we had, through that research, found different recommendations as to going about creating a VIP park. You drop the vehicle off, things like that with a valet service. And from there, I really got interested in the marketing research. My faculty that I was with, Dr. DePrano and Dr. Teitelbaum, had said, you're really good in the classroom, you're really good with this research, you should think about doing a PhD. And at that time, I didn't know what that entailed. I was kind of like, didn't know what that entailed. I was kind of like, I'll look into it. I thought I'd go back to industry, maybe work for Reynolds & Reynolds again. And I really enjoyed teaching in the classroom. I ended up going to University of Rhode Island for my PhD in marketing, working on several other research projects, and I really enjoy my time here at EKU. I think we've got some great students. I've been able to work on some interesting marketing projects as well. and looking forward to seeing where the rest of my marketing career takes me.
Absolutely. Okay. So I know you're into some research. Why don't you go ahead and tell me about some of the projects that you've done since you've been at Eastern Kentucky? Maybe your favorite one, or maybe the most peculiar one.
Sure. So one of the Koslow, she's a honors professor, so she teaches in the honors program, but she's also in the biology department. And we had worked on more of an educational research paper recently, where we had her biology class and my consumer behavior marketing class actually collaborate on a project with the American Chestnut Foundation. And when we looked in the literature and best educational practices, we never saw like two disciplines having classes work together on that same project for a real business and live client. That's referred to as experiential learning, because it gets the students that hands-on approach and hopefully simulate that real-world environment close to what they'll be doing once they get their entry-level jobs. But with that project, what we were looking at was, what were those team dynamics? Did we have issues similar to like in the workforce, where we might have the marketing department doesn't talk to the accounting department, and the accounting department doesn't talk to the supply chain department, and as a result, we might have miscommunication, we might not have as good of productivity. So with that experiment, what we did is we had some of her students, and then we had a separate control group of just marketing students creating these recommendations for the American Chestnut Foundation as to how can they get more people to plant chestnut trees, volunteer, donate money. Because you've probably heard the song "Chestnuts Roasting Over an Open Fire," right? They used to be a part of our American tradition, but what happened was there was an invasive bacteria that had came in. It was a blight, and it actually started killing all the American chestnut trees. So as a result, they were basically going to become extinct, but this group had crossbred it with a Chinese version of the tree, and that was resistant to the blight. So as a result, they were able to kind of save the American chestnut tree and bring it back to the Appalachian region. The thing is as a result of that original part, less people were eating chestnuts, less people have the trees around, so there's a major initiative to kind of bring those back and realize what that history was of the chestnut tree. So students worked on that project, and we were able to look at some different dynamics of teams working together, such as role conflict. Do we have different ideas as to what our responsibilities are? Are people on our group actually contributing? Do we even know what our group members are doing within that team? How productive do we think we were as a result of this project? And what we did find was those diverse team makeups actually rated their teammates as lower. There was more role ambiguity. There was more conflict amongst group members versus those teams that worked alone. And Dr. Koslow and I actually recently presented that at the Society for Marketing Advances conference. It's one of our A-level conferences within the marketing discipline, and we actually won the Best Paper Award for the marketing education track. So I thought that brought good publicity for EKU, and I'm hoping that in a journal, we're working on some final revisions before we send that out. And then in addition to that, I think we can do a follow-up project where we're able to see, okay, are there some interventions or ways that we can get some of those diverse teams to work together? Because now we've got scientists and business people. Can we tap into both of their knowledge bases and actually result in like more productivity, better recommendations, and hopefully a better team atmosphere or environment? So that's one of my more recent projects, Riley, that I think's gotten some good publicity and notoriety. Just looking at the marketing and general research that I do, the area that I focus on is pricing, but I actually focus primarily on what's referred to as pay what you want pricing. Okay. So there's actually a cafe in Versailles, Kentucky, where it's called Spark Community Cafe. You go to the cafe, you order what you want, 5 sandwiches, 10 bagels, box of donuts, soda. You pick the price. You could pay $0 for that. You could pay $5. You could pay $100, $1,000. So this is a relatively newer pricing mechanism where the consumer has full control setting the price, a lot different than the store where they say, this bag of chips is $3. You got to pay it, take it or leave it. So now giving the customer some control. Are there instances where we can do that and still remain profitable? So we've seen it there. There's musicians like the band Radiohead that have done this with their album Rainbows. There's a few other places that have done it as well. Some of these have gone out of business. Others have seen a lot of awareness based off of this. It's almost a replacement for a sampling technique. Instead of giving the product away for free, now people might be trying it for the first time, but also paying you to try it. Right. So I've got a couple of research projects going on in there where we've had some positive results, and one that's currently in process to sending it to a journal.
That's really interesting.
In process to sending it to a journal.
That's really interesting. Huh. Okay. Well, last question here. With this young entrepreneurial generation, what advice would you give them going forward? Do you like the idea of people starting their own businesses, maybe right out of college after a few years of experience? Or do you think it's, kind of just a dying trend, or what do you think about that?
No, so I think marketing is definitely entrepreneurial, and I would say that there's several great entrepreneurs, and they might not even have marketing backgrounds, but one that comes to mind is Oprah. So Oprah started off as a talk show host. She was very successful in that area. A lot of people regularly tuned into her show. From there, she was able to create her own television network, and this is before we had social media sites to say that she's got followers and that she's an influencer, right? She was an influencer before we started having all these metrics to measure that, and she's got things like her book club. If she recommends a book, it's sold out for months. It's on back order. If she recommends a particular product, her fans are right there buying it up, and it's probably not very long. So from that, she's been able to create her own network. She's bought into companies recently like Weight Watchers. From there, she's even been able to create her own brand O. So I know my sister, she lives in Austin, Texas. She's been recommending, she's like, you got to try the O pizza. It's made of cauliflower crust. It's healthier for you. So it goes in that health and wellness trend that we're seeing. But I think Oprah's done a really good job of creating her own brand and then several products that have gone off of that. And Riley, to your question about the entrepreneurship for students, I would say don't even wait until after school. Like as a college student or even in high school, you can be an entrepreneur and be very successful. I think there's a lot of opportunities now with social media to be able to get your in. Some of those we've got free options with social media. Some you might just be putting in a small investment to boost your posts or get some more recognition, or even partnerships with other influencers to get your name out there. So I think there's a lot of areas to become a product expert or specialist. We do see on places like Instagram or YouTube, you might be able to go out there and say, hey, I'm a public relations professional. I'm like a student, and I'm here to talk about different public relations topics. Things like this, like a podcast you can create. There's lots of different content that's out there, but I think there's definitely room for students to be able to create their own products, whether that's live content like this, or it's maybe creating actual goods outside of services and ideas. So I would highly recommend students to do that, and I would not just say, hey, try it once, and if it fails, right, go in and take a full-time job. I think with entrepreneurship, you've got to be able to take no, you've got to take rejections and failures, but you've got to learn from those. So what went wrong? How could I change it the next time? And then how could this maybe idea improve in its that original test that you've got?
I agree. That's awesome advice. All right. Well, Dr. Blair, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for being a part of this series. And, you've been listening to Eastern Progress Media Network.